Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's divine comedy when I put Terry Jones's Monty Python's Life of Brian against Kevin Smith's Dogma. And this one was a really hard decision to make because both of these films are wildly hilarious and they both like treat their material with the most utmost respect. And so let's just dive right on into the nitty and the picky. First up, we have Terry Jones's Monty Python's Life of Brian, which the title character is what the film centers around. This kid named Brian always keeps getting mistaken for the Messiah, Jesus Christ, even at the beginning of his life, because that opening sequence is one of the funniest like scenes I've ever seen where you get the three wise men, they're coming to celebrate the birth of Jesus and they end up going to this kid Brian's place. And the mother is just fucking hilarious, it's like, and then when they find out that it's the wrong person, they take all the frankincense and myrrh and gold and take it all back. And, it's just a hilarious case of mistaken identity and stuff. But then, the kid grows up and the next thing you see is like the Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and everything. And, that whole, the film itself is just filled with like just nonstop hilarity. Of course, the brilliant team of Monty Python, John Cleese, Michael Palin, Graham Chapman, Eric Idle, Terry Gilliam, and Terry Jones. I mean, they just like nonstop hilarity because that whole crowd scene of those people listening to the Sermon on the Mount and, can't hear him and, getting it all wrong and then fighting with each other. It's just fucking hilarious, and the whole film is just like that. There's nonstop, all from those guys that play multiple parts in this role and never miss a beat while doing it. And, and then like Brian himself, played by Graham Chapman, ends up getting into all kinds of like revolutionary activity. And even that, the film itself pokes fun, not just of religion, but like even transgender stuff and just, gender politics as well. And just, but like the one who probably gets the most laughs in this film is the mother of Brian. It's like, he's not the Messiah. He's a naughty, naughty boy. I mean, that's just fucking hilarious. And the whole biggest dickus ruckus thing is like, they don't believe that Naughtius Maximus, who is supposedly Brian's father, is like a real person. I was a joke. Oh no, biggest dickus is my friend. It's like, dude, it's just fucking hilarious. And that ending with the mass crucifixion is just fucking, it's because they're singing, always look on the brighter side of life, and just doing line dancing on in a crucifixion scene. It's just pure fucking brilliance, and of course there's some wild ass moments in between. There's that alien spaceship in the middle of it while Brian's getting away from the Centurions and stuff. And of course, like I said, everybody in this film never misses a beat. That it's just nonstop hilarity. It's like, you're supposed to be individuals. We're supposed to be individuals. It's just, it really pokes fun a lot of the hypocrisy of religion and how everybody, it just becomes, followers for no reason and stuff. And how they'll follow anybody if they think they're the Messiah, and that's what happens to Brian. And even that Suicide Squad at the end that are supposed to save Brian, but they end up just killing themselves. It's just like pure brilliance. I mean, my only complaint with this film is maybe the jokes run a little too long, but I mean that just goes with timing, pacing of the times and stuff. But this is probably the best Monty Python movie, and we move forward to Kevin Smith's Dogma. That's equally hilarious in my opinion, but where Dogma kind of stands apart from Life of Brian is this is more of an adventure fantasy film, just is disguised as comedy about religion, because the film, said, it's very well written. This point in Kevin Smith's career, this was like apex Kevin Smith, because he had done, silly comedies, but also coming off one of his more serious ones, Chasing Amy. He finally like really had something to say, and he like just has fun with the material, because like this film boasts an ensemble cast. I mean, you got Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, who are angels who were kicked out of heaven, and they were sent to hell. No, West Wisconsin is one of the funniest lines in the film. But now they've been alerted to the fact that there's a way for them to go back to heaven if they go through all that plenary indulgence thing that this Catholic church is having their centennial. And the priest, played by George Carlin, is fucking hilarious. He gets a lot of laughs in the film. And so then they set out on this journey. Well, God's indisposed. So they get the last scion, the voice of God, played by Alan Rickman, who the great late great Alan Rickman. He's absolutely brilliant in the film, and he seeks out the last scion, which is played by the lovely Linda Fiorentino, who just really crushes in this film. And on her journey, she's told that she's gonna, because her job is to stop, or mission more like it. Her mission is to stop these two angels from going through the ark, because then that'll prove God wrong, and since God is infallible, then it'll negate all of existence. And so already the stakes are like majorly high, and so she's gonna run into two prophets who actually are Jay and Silent Bob, and of course, those guys are a barrel of laughs. Especially Jason Mewes, and of course, the Kevin Smith's, other than his dialogue, the dialogue in this movie is just par brilliance. Like I said, apex Kevin Smith. I don't think he's really topped the dialogue in this movie. Granted, there's like hints of pastiche. He quotes a lot of movies in this, include stuff like Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and even like stuff like The $1 Million Man and or The $6 Million Man, whatever the fuck that title was, and even The Incredible Hulk. There's a lot of like pop culture comic book references in this, but that's just Kevin Smith. You can't really fault him for that, but he does it in a way that's eloquent and fits organically into the story, into the film, and when especially the delivery that these actors give, you can't really fault it for that. And so on her journey, she's got the two prophets, but then also she gets the 13th apostle, played by Chris Rock, who was left out of the Bible because he was black. And then also the muse, played by the lovely, incredibly beautiful Selma Hayek, who, at this point in time, you very rarely saw Selma Hayek in a movie where she wasn't playing a stripper. No complaints there, But so she's got all this help, and then there's also this demon Azrael, played by the brilliant Jason Lee. And, he's the one that kind of orchestrated this whole thing, and he's trying to make sure that it goes to plan. He's got these three hockey kids that are, his goons, beating the fuck. They're the ones that initially like put God in a coma, or at least the human form of God. So like, there's no way that he can get back to heaven. And there's also the shit demon that he dispatches. This is probably the most absurd thing in the film, but I mean, it's still like, even the origin story of that demon is pretty fucking brilliant, because you can tell by this film that Kevin Smith not only understands like Catholicism and all like the mythology behind all the religions, but he has a respect for it, and he's able to make fun of it in a way that is respectful but still silly enough to fit in his oeuvre, And so the film, like, for a Kevin Smith film, has a lot of action. Like I said, this is kind of the perfect adventure formula. It opens with, the fucking, you meet the characters, there's a call to action, then you see the journey, and then you see the climax. And it's just that there's pandemonium at the fucking end, because, Ben Affleck loses his shit, and he decides that he's going to be the angel of death now. And like, where Matt Damon turns into the voice of reason. Of course, their chemistry too. I mean, they were coming off of Good Will Hunting, so like, this was kind of like that ender of the 90s, where 1999 was a hell of a year for fucking movies. I mean, the end of, not only the end of a decade, but the end of a century, and people were losing their fucking minds. And this is a clear cut example of that insanity, because this movie did spark a lot of controversy because of the religious aspects of it, and so did Life of Brian. Life of Brian was probably equally as controversial, because anytime you're dealing with religion, especially making a parody of religion, people tend to kind of lose their shit about it. But I would say both films are very respectful of the material and stuff, because like, even in Life of Brian, they're not necessarily making fun of like Jesus or anything. It's more the misunderstanding of this guy Brian that everybody thinks is the Messiah and stuff. And then of course, like, even in Dogma, there's kind of, I mean, shit, he got Alanis Morissette to play God. You can't tell me you're a Alanis Morissette fan without telling me you're an Alanis Morissette fan. So it's just very hard decision to make, but I gotta give this one to Dogma, mainly because I wouldn't say Dogma is funnier than Life of Brian. Life of Brian is pretty fucking hilarious. Like, there's not really a dull moment in that movie. They do a lot of batshit crazy stuff, but the main thing that usually comes down to these decisions is which one is the better movie. And I would say Dogma is the better movie, because like I said, I don't think it's funnier than Life of Brian. Granted, it's just as funny maybe, but it plays better as an actual movie, you know, because now granted, Life of Brian is more tangential than most of their other stuff, with the exception of maybe Holy Grail, but like it's just something like beautiful about Dogma that's, you know, it's fun and it deals with a lot of serious shit, you know, and you know there's a lot, it's got a lot of heart too. That whole speech about, you know, it's better to have an idea than a belief, you know, that's real shit, you know. So this round goes to Dogma. For anybody keeping score, that is 68 to 54. 70s are only up by 14 now. Like I said, the 90s keep coming back with these 1-2 punches and stuff. That lead is still considerable for the 70s, but who knows? You know, with the 90s had gems and they can hold their own with the best of them. So if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. Like I said, it's one asshole's opinion and one self-indulgent journey to see which decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. So stay tuned for more of these bonus rounds and, you know, even the main events, because who knows how long this shit is going to go on.